The September sun of 1873 was sinking low, laying a golden sheen across the valley, when the clatter of stagecoach wheels fell suddenly silent before the Willow Creek depot. Charles Montgomery stood tall on the wooden platform, the brim of his weathered Stetson shadowing his eyes as he studied the coach that had just rolled in. His broad hand checked his pocket watch for the fourth time before brushing over the neat trim of his beard. 5 long years of solitude on his Wyoming Territory ranch had passed, and tonight he was to greet the woman who had agreed, sight unseen, to be his wife. The driver swung down, muttering about a hard road out of Cheyenne, and added in a low voice, "Your bride didn't say a blessed word the whole ride." Charles felt his throat go dry. The letters he had exchanged with Miss Olivia Foster had been brief but full of promise. She was a 22-year-old schoolteacher from Boston, longing for a new beginning in the West. Her words had been measured, intelligent, carrying the weight of someone who understood the kind of life a rancher's wife would be asked to shoulder. The coach door creaked open. A gloved hand appeared first, delicate and hesitant, then the hem of a blue traveling dress dusted from the long journey. A woman stepped down, standing still for a moment, her face hidden beneath the brim of a modest bonnet. When at last she lifted her gaze, the practiced greeting Charles had prepared caught in his throat. Her face was wet with tears, her blue eyes, swollen and red. She hugged a small handbag against her chest as though it were armor, her shoulders trembling visibly even beneath the heavy traveling cloak. "Miss Foster?" Charles stepped forward, removing his hat. She gave the smallest of nods, lips pressed tightly as if to hold back a flood. "I'm Charles Montgomery," he said, extending his hand. She took it, though her grip was reluctant. "Welcome to Willow Creek." Fresh tears welled in her eyes. She dabbed at them with a handkerchief already damp. "I'm sorry, Mr. Montgomery," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This isn't the way I imagined our first meeting would be." Around them, the station bustled, voices calling, trunks being heaved, passengers coming and going. A handful of onlookers had paused, curiosity plain on their faces. Charles gently guided her away from the stairs to a small bench at the far end of the platform. Once she was seated, he drew a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. "You don't have to put on a brave face for me," he said softly. "Whatever weighs on you, Miss Foster, I reckon you've had a long road to think on it. You don't need to smile for my sake." Her eyes widened slightly as she took the handkerchief with a trembling hand. "You are kind, sir." Drawing a deep breath, she managed, I fear I've made a terrible mistake." Charles felt his chest tighten. He had heard the stories, mail-order brides who took one look at their intended and fled back east on the next coach. He wasn't vain, but he knew he was a man of decent bearing, tall, broad-shouldered at 31, his features weathered by sun and wind but, as his mother often said, not unhandsome. "Is it me?" he asked plainly. "If I'm not what you expected." "No," she cut in quickly, her expression startled. "No, Mr. Montgomery. It isn't you. It's," her glance flicked nervously around them. "Could we speak somewhere more private?" Charles nodded once. He fetched her trunk from the coach, loaded it into his wagon, then helped her climb onto the wooden seat beside him. Taking his place at her side, he gave the reins a light snap, setting the team into motion. "My place is 4 miles out," he told her. "We can talk freely there, or, if you'd rather, I can take you to the hotel." Olivia clutched her bag tighter, as if it were the only solid thing she had left. "Your home will be best." "I think so." They rode in silence down the dusty main street of Willow Creek. There was little to see, one general store, a blacksmith's forge, the saloon, a small church, and a scattering of other buildings. Charles noticed Olivia's eyes darting from one to the next, wary, uneasy. When the wagon left the town behind and the road wound out across Golden Prairie, she finally spoke. "I lied to you, Mr. Montgomery." He kept his eyes on the horizon, his face unreadable though a weight pressed heavy in his chest. "About what, exactly?" "In my letters." Her voice steadied, if only slightly. I wasn't entirely truthful about my circumstances." The wagon jolted over a rut, rocking them both. Charles caught her arm instinctively, steadying her, then pulled back just as quick. "I'm listening," he said quietly. Olivia drew in a steadying breath. "I told you I was a schoolteacher in Boston." That part was true. Her fingers twisted the handkerchief he had given her. "But I did not leave my position by choice. The headmaster's son, he developed feelings for me. When I rejected his advances, he turned spiteful. He told his father I had behaved improperly toward him. Charles's jaw hardened. And they believed him? She gave a small, broken nod. My reputation was ruined overnight. No respectable school would hire me afterward. I couldn't find work anywhere in Boston. A bitter smile flickered across her lips. A woman whose name is stained has precious few choices. They crested a rise, and Charles's ranch came into view, a modest two-story house with a broad porch, ringed by barns and outbuildings. Beyond, cattle grazed on the golden stretch of open prairie. "So you answered my advertisement," Charles said quietly. "Yes. But I did not tell you about the scandal." Her tear-streaked face was set with new resolve as she looked at him directly. "I feared you would not consider me if you knew. I will understand if you wish to dissolve our agreement. I can return to town and take the next coach east." Charles slowed the team as the wagon rolled nearer the homestead. "Miss Foster, may I be plain with you?" She nodded. "I don't have a taste for games or deceit. Out here, a person is judged by what they do, not what others whisper. What matters to me is whether you are honest about wanting a true partnership, a willingness to work alongside me to build something worth keeping." He gestured toward the ranch. "This land is my life's work. It isn't grand by Boston standards, but it is mine. I sought a wife because I'd had enough of facing it alone." The wagon drew to a halt before the house. From the yard, a dog barked eagerly and bounded forward. "That's Rusty," Charles said, his voice softening. "He's friendly, just excitable." Olivia watched the dog circle the wagon, her expression easing for the first time. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, turning back to him. "I may have concealed part of my past, but I am honest about this. I want a new beginning, and I am not afraid of hard work. I have never shied from difficulty." She straightened her shoulders. "If you are still willing to honor our agreement, I promise you will not find me lacking in effort or devotion." Charles studied her for a long moment. Beneath the traces of tears and fear, he saw the set of her jaw, the return of steadiness in her eyes. "Let's get you settled first," he said at last, climbing down from the wagon. "You've had a long road. We can speak of the future once you've rested." He helped her down. Her hand was small in his, her weight light as he steadied her to the ground. Rusty bounded up, tail wagging. Olivia cautiously extended her hand. "Hello, Rusty," she whispered. The dog sniffed, then wagged harder, as though granting his approval. Charles carried her trunk to the porch, pushing open the front door. "It's not fancy," he warned, suddenly seeing the house through a stranger's eyes. The furnishings were sturdy and plain, the layout practical. He had spent the last week scrubbing until every surface shone, but it still bore the stamp of a bachelor's life. Olivia stepped inside, removing her bonnet at last. Charles saw her more clearly now, golden hair drawn into a neat bun, delicate but not fragile features, and blue eyes that, even red-rimmed from tears, still glimmered with the intelligence he had glimpsed in her letters. "It's lovely," she said softly, her gaze taking in the wide stone hearth, the shelves lined with books, the tall windows glowing with late afternoon light. "Did you build it yourself?" "Most of it," Charles admitted. "Had help with the frame and the chimney." He motioned toward the staircase. "Your room is upstairs, first door on the right. I prepared it for you, but if there's anything you'd like changed, just say." She gave him a questioning look. "We're not married yet, Miss Foster," he explained. "The circuit preacher passes through every other week. He'll be here this weekend, if he let the rest hang in the air." Relief softened her features. "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. That is thoughtful of you." Charles carried her trunk upstairs and set it down in the room he had worked to make ready. A new quilt from the general store lay folded at the foot of the bed, curtains sewn by his neighbor Mrs. Brennan hung neatly at the window, and a small jar of wildflowers sat on the dressing table. When he came back down, he found Olivia standing by the window, looking out across the ranch. Rusty had already curled at her feet, as though she belonged there. "I need to tend to the evening chores," Charles said. "The kitchen's well stocked, but don't trouble yourself about supper if you're too tired. There's stew left from yesterday." She turned from the window. "I'll prepare dinner, Mr. Montgomery. It's the least I can do, after your understanding." Charles gave a brief nod and moved toward the door, but paused. "Miss Foster?" "Yes?" "Whatever happened in Boston, it stays in Boston. Here, you decide who you are." For the first time, a true smile lit her face. "Thank you." Outside, as Charles strode toward the barn, he wondered just what he had gotten himself into. A mail-order bride with a ruined reputation was not what he had pictured. But then again, he suspected his ranch was not what she had pictured either. He resolved to give it a week. A week to see if something real could be built from such an unexpected beginning. Yet her reaction had surprised him. No demands, no desperate denials, only tears and the truth, laid bare. "You don't have to pretend with me," he had told her. Could she trust such generosity? Life had taught her that men's kindness often came at a cost. As Olivia gathered ingredients in the kitchen, she began to explore. The sitting room held a worn but comfortable armchair beside shelves lined with an impressive collection for a frontier rancher, volumes of history, poetry, even novels. A desk in the corner bore neatly stacked papers, proof of a man who kept his business affairs in careful order. That evening, when Charles returned home, the scent of freshly cooked food greeted him at the door, so warm and unexpected that he paused, a look of surprise softening his rugged features. "You didn't need to trouble yourself," he said, washing his hands in the basin she had set out for him. "It's no trouble at all." "I enjoy cooking," Olivia replied, motioning toward the table. "Please, sit." At first, they ate in an uneasy silence, the scrape of cutlery against plates louder than their words. But when Charles asked about her journey west, the stiffness slowly gave way. The conversation found its rhythm in safe topics, the shifting landscapes she had glimpsed from train and stagecoach windows, the capricious spring weather of Wyoming. Charles spoke of his ranch, 60 head of cattle now, with plans to double that number within 2 years. "That's remarkable," Olivia said earnestly. "You've accomplished so much on your own." He shrugged, though a hint of pride glimmered in his voice. "Neighbors lend a hand when it's needed. Out here, folks know we survive by looking out for one another." After a moment's hesitation, he mentioned that the Brennan family had invited them for Sunday supper after church. "Martha's keen to meet you," he added. "We'll go, unless you'd rather not." Olivia's stomach tightened at the thought of meeting strangers, but she forced a smile. "That sounds lovely." When the meal was finished, Charles disappeared into the front room and returned with a folded sheet of paper, which he set before her. She smoothed it open with careful fingers, her eyes widening as she realized it was the deed to his ranch. His name was written firmly across it, with a blank space left for hers. "If we marry," he explained, his voice steady, "half of everything will belong to you. I asked my lawyer to draw this up last month. I want my wife to be a true partner, not just a housekeeper with no claim to what we build together." Olivia stared at the document, speechless. In Boston, married women had no legal rights to property. Yet here, in this raw frontier, a near stranger offered her a security most women, even in the highest circles of society, could never dream of. "Why would you do this?" she finally asked. Charles's face remained grave. "Because ranching is hard. The days are long, the winters harsher still. If someone is to share that burden with me, they deserve to share the reward as well. He reclaimed the paper, folding it neatly. Think on it. There's no need for an answer tonight. Afterward, he insisted on washing the dishes while Olivia dried them. The ordinary work, done side by side, carried a strange intimacy. When their hands brushed over a plate, Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. I think I should rest, she said softly when the last dish was put away. It's been a long day. Charles nodded. Breakfast is at sunrise most mornings, but sleep as late as you like. You've come a far road. Upstairs, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, her mind reeling. Outside, the Wyoming sky stretched vast and endless, ablaze with more stars than she had ever seen in Boston. The silence was profound, no rattling carriage wheels, no neighbors' voices through thin walls. Only the sigh of wind in the grass, the distant low of cattle, and somewhere below, the steady footsteps of the man who might one day be her husband. The next morning, golden sunlight streamed through curtains she had forgotten to draw. For a moment, she didn't recognize the room, then the memories of yesterday rushed back. She bolted upright, flustered to find the sun already high. Dressing quickly in a plain brown work dress, she pinned her hair neatly and hurried downstairs, bracing herself for Charles's impatience. But the house was quiet. Only Rusty, the dog, greeted her cheerfully in the kitchen. On the table lay a note, written in a surprisingly elegant hand. Miss Foster, I've gone to check the north pasture. Back by mid-morning. Coffee on the stove, bread and preserves for breakfast. Rest well. C.M. Relieved, Olivia poured herself coffee and stepped onto the porch. In daylight, the view stunned her, the rolling prairie stretched to the distant mountains, cattle grazing peacefully in the nearer fields. The ranch's outbuildings were larger, sturdier than she had realized in yesterday's fading light. After breakfast, unwilling to sit idle, she inventoried the kitchen, drafting a list of supplies for the next trip into town. Then she rolled up her sleeves and began cleaning. By mid-morning she had swept every floor, dusted every surface, and was kneading dough for fresh bread when she heard hoofs outside. Through the window she saw Charles dismount, a fluid, practiced motion that spoke of years in the saddle. He removed his hat, wiped his brow, and led his horse toward the barn. Olivia caught her reflection in the small mirror by the door, hastily smoothing stray strands of hair and brushing flour from her cheek, though she wasn't sure why she suddenly cared how she looked. When Charles entered, the warm scent of baking bread filled the room. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of gleaming surfaces and neatly ordered shelves. You've kept yourself busy, he said, hanging his hat on a peg. I hope you don't mind, Olivia replied. I wanted to be useful. Mind? It hasn't looked this fine since my mother visited 3 years ago. The weight in his voice gave her pause. Your parents are back east? She asked gently. He shook his head. They've passed. My father, just after the war. My mother, in 1870. I'm sorry, she said with quiet sincerity. He nodded in acknowledgement. And your family? You mentioned your parents in Boston. Olivia kept her hands on the dough. My father is a merchant. My mother manages their social affairs. I have 2 younger sisters. She hesitated. They don't know I came west to marry. They believe I accepted a teaching position in Chicago. His brow lifted. You didn't tell them? They wouldn't have understood, she said, kneading the dough harder than necessary. After the scandal, their concern was only how it reflected on their standing. My father suggested I stay with a cousin in Maine until the whispers faded, as if one could simply hide for years until society forgot. Coming west as a mail-order bride felt like a better choice. It offered a new beginning, and independence, even if that independence comes through marriage. Charles's expression softened. Well, I'm glad you're here, whatever your reasons. And what did you imagine my reasons were, Mr. Montgomery? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Leaning against the doorframe, he considered. Truthfully, I thought you might be fleeing poverty, or chasing adventure, or simply practical enough to see that a partnership of equals could grow into something worth keeping. And now, knowing the truth, she pressed. He looked at her steadily. I think you're braver than most men I've known. It takes courage to leave everything familiar behind, especially alone. The plain words, free of flattery, warmed something deep inside her. She turned quickly back to the dough, her cheeks hot. I should finish this bread, she murmured. And when you're ready, Charles said gently, I'll show you the ranch. A woman ought to know just what she's agreeing to. An hour later, they walked the land together, Rusty bounding ahead through the tall grass. Charles pointed out the boundaries of his property, explaining his plans for expansion, and showed her the creek that supplied their water. This stream never runs dry, not even in the drought years, he said. That's why this land was worth the gamble. How long have you been here? Olivia asked, trying to match his long strides. 5 years, he answered. Came west after the war with nothing but a handful of savings. Hired myself out to other ranches until I could buy this place. He gestured toward a half-finished structure beside the barn. That'll be a bigger smokehouse. The herd's growing, and we'll need more room for processing. Olivia noticed how his face lit up when he spoke of the ranch. This wasn't just property to him, it was a vision being brought to life. It's remarkable, what you've built, she said with quiet sincerity. Charles glanced at her, as though weighing the truth of her words. Not what most women would call remarkable. Perhaps I'm not most women, she answered. A smile broke across his face then, the first true smile she had seen from him. It softened his stern features, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. No, Miss Foster, he said warmly. I don't believe you are. They walked on, their steps falling more easily into rhythm with one another. The vastness of the landscape made Olivia feel both small and strangely free, no buildings hemming her in, no judgmental eyes peering from windows. You may as well call me Olivia, she said suddenly. If we're to consider marriage, Miss Foster seems far too formal. Charles inclined his head. Olivia, then. And I am Charles. At the cattle barn, he introduced her to the horses, his own chestnut stallion, Buck, a speckled mare named Penny, and a gentle Palomino. This one's yours, if you decide to stay, he said as the Palomino nuzzled Olivia's shoulder. Her name's Daisy. Gentle as they come, perfect for someone new to riding. Olivia stroked the horse's velvety nose. And what makes you think I'm new to riding? Charles looked genuinely surprised. You've ridden before? My grandfather had a farm outside Boston, she said. I spent my summers there as a girl. I may not be a cowgirl, but I can keep my seat. She smiled, recalling how her grandfather had once told her she had a natural seat in the saddle. For a moment, Charles only studied her, something unreadable in his gaze. Then he laughed, a deep, warm sound that Olivia immediately wished to hear again. Then I was mistaken, he said. Seems Miss Olivia Foster has more to her than meets the eye. I could say the same about you, Mr. Charles Montgomery, she replied. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a spark of genuine connection that startled them both. Charles cleared his throat and looked away first. We should head back, he said. The wind's picking up. Sky to the west looks like a storm's brewing. Indeed, dark clouds were gathering along the horizon. By the time they returned to the house, the wind had risen, carrying the sharp scent of rain. The storm broke soon after, and they spent the afternoon indoors. Charles showed Olivia his account books, explaining the ranch's finances with a surprising transparency. She was impressed by the meticulous records and the way he had built his operation carefully, without falling into debt. Most ranchers borrow heavy, he explained. One hard winter can ruin them. I'd rather grow slow, but steady. That makes sense, Olivia agreed. Though I imagine it requires patience. That, he admitted with a half-smile, is something I've had to learn. Not always my strongest trait. When lightning flashed outside, Charles lit a fire in the hearth. The soft crackle of flames and the steady drumming of rain created a cocoon of warmth, easing their conversation. Olivia found herself telling stories of her teaching days, the children she'd grown attached to, the quiet satisfaction of watching young minds take root and grow. "Do you miss it?" Charles asked. "Yes," she said honestly. "But that chapter is closed now." "Perhaps not entirely," he mused. "Willow Creek's growing fast. There's talk of building a proper schoolhouse next year. They'll be needing a teacher." Olivia gave him a sharp look. "You wouldn't mind your wife working outside the home?" Charles shrugged. "The ranch will always need tending. But the winters are long. And if teaching brings you joy," he let the thought trail off. That evening, they prepared supper together, moving about the kitchen with a growing ease in each other's company. Over the meal, Charles explained the rhythm of ranch life through the seasons, calving in the spring, grazing in summer, harvesting in autumn, and maintenance in winter. "It's never easy," he warned. "But there's a kind of satisfaction in it." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Olivia said firmly. "Though I'll admit, I've never milked a cow." Charles chuckled. "We've only one milk cow, old Bessie. She's gentle enough. I'll show you tomorrow, if you'd like." "I'd like that very much," Olivia said, surprised to realize she meant it. That night, lying awake in bed and listening to the steady patter of rain, Olivia reflected on the sudden turn her life had taken. Only 2 days earlier, she had wept in the stagecoach, certain she had made a dreadful mistake. Now she found herself contemplating a future, uncertain, yes, but filled with real possibility. Charles Montgomery was not the man she had imagined from his letters. The serious, practical rancher possessed depths she had not expected, intelligence, thoughtfulness, and a quiet strength that made her feel at ease rather than intimidated. Of course, this was not love, such feelings could not blossom in a single day. But it was something, a foundation, perhaps, upon which love might be built. A promise of marriage and the weight of truth. On the ride back to the ranch, Charles reined in the horses atop a hill and turned to Olivia. "I just want you to see it this way," he said quietly. "You're home, if you still choose it to be." Olivia gazed at the sturdy house below, set against the wide sweep of the land. There was no grandeur to it, only honesty and purpose. And somehow, that moved her more deeply than anything she had known in Boston. "I choose it," she said firmly. Before Sunday came, Charles felt compelled to share with Olivia a truth he had carried for years. He told her why he had sought a wife through letters instead of courting one of the local women. Before the war, he had been engaged to a woman named Elizabeth. When he returned, changed in ways the battlefield had carved into his soul, Elizabeth could no longer accept the man he had become. Her rejection had left him hollow, unwilling to explain himself to another. What he wanted was not romance painted in illusions, but a partnership, someone who would take him as he was, not as he had once been. That was why he had written his advertisement so plainly. Olivia listened, and in his words she found a mirror of her own longing. By paths neither had expected, they had stumbled into sincerity. In a quiet moment, Charles drew out a folded paper, his ranch deed. Her breath caught when she saw her name left in blank space beside his. "If we marry," he said, his voice steady, "half of everything will be yours." I want a wife who is a true partner, not a housekeeper with no claim in what we build." The gesture left Olivia stunned. In Boston, a married woman could claim no property at all. Here, this man was offering her equality, trust, and something she had thought forever denied her, belonging. By then, her decision was clear. She would stand with him at the altar. Charles revealed he had even prepared a separate room upstairs for her until the vows were spoken, reminding her gently, "We're not wed yet. The pastor will be in town this weekend." He gave her his mother's ring, a delicate band of gold crowned with a flawless diamond. Olivia accepted it with tears and a tremor in her voice. The wedding and their first night. Sunday morning dawned clear and gentle, a perfect day for a wedding. Olivia rose early, too anxious to remain in bed. She bathed, pinned her hair with her grandmother's pearl combs, and slipped into her cornflower blue wedding dress. The reflection in the mirror startled her. She no longer saw the frightened woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in tears only 3 days ago. Her cheeks glowed with color, her eyes held a spark that had been missing for months. A soft knock came at her door. "Olivia," Charles's voice rumbled through the wood. "Are you ready? We should head out if we're to be on time." When she opened the door, he stood before her in his finest suit, dark wool tailored neat, a crisp white shirt, and a string tie. His beard trimmed, his hair smoothed back, he looked less the weathered rancher and more a gentleman. His eyes widened at the sight of her. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Olivia blushed. "Thank you. And you, why, you look rather dashing yourself." He cleared his throat awkwardly and reached into his coat, drawing out a small velvet pouch. "This belonged to my mother. I'd be honored if you'd wear it." Inside lay the gold diamond ring. "Charles," she whispered, "it's exquisite." When he began to ask if she might prefer something else, she cut him off with quiet firmness. "No, it's perfect. I'm honored to wear it." Relief softened his face as he slid it onto her finger. The church was nearly full when they arrived. Word of Charles Montgomery's wedding had swept through the valley, drawing neighbors and ranchers alike. Olivia felt a wave of panic at so many unfamiliar faces, but Charles's steady presence at her side anchored her. Pastor Jenkins greeted them warmly. The ceremony was simple yet profound, the traditional vows spoken clear and strong. Charles's hands trembled only slightly as he placed the ring upon her finger. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor declared. "Mr. Montgomery, you may kiss your bride." Charles looked into Olivia's eyes, silently asking permission. She gave the smallest nod. His lips brushed hers in a kiss that was tender, restrained, a promise more than a claim. When they turned to face the congregation as man and wife, the warmth of the applause and cheers startled Olivia. Only days ago, these had been strangers. Now, they seemed to welcome her as one of their own. The Brennan family hosted a jubilant supper that evening. Martha Brennan embraced Olivia as though she were a long-lost daughter. "That man has needed a good woman for years," Martha said, smiling. "I only hope I can be that for him," Olivia admitted softly. "You already are, dear. I've never seen him smile the way he has with you." Stories flowed around the dinner table, tales of Charles's steadfastness, his hard work, and his quiet generosity. The Brennan sons recounted how he had saved their herd during the blizzard of '71, riding out when most men would have stayed behind. Charles flushed at the praise. "Anyone would have done the same," he muttered. "No," Joseph Brennan said firmly. "Not anyone. Which is why we're glad you found someone who makes you happy. A man who gives so much deserves to be given back." Later, returning to the ranch that was now theirs together, Charles swept Olivia into his arms and carried her across the threshold. "It's tradition," he murmured with a smile. "For luck." Inside, he set her down gently, his hand lingering at her waist. He began, haltingly, "Olivia, I don't expect." She pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. "I know. But I'm your wife now, in name and in law. And I want to be your wife in truth, if you'll have me." His kiss then was different, still tender, but with an undercurrent of passion that made her heart race. That night, in the quiet shadows of their shared room, they came together as husband and wife. Charles was patient, reverent in his touch, as though she were something fragile and precious. For Olivia, it was discovery, of closeness, of pleasure, of trust. Cradled in his arms afterward, she felt a peace she had thought forever lost after the scandal in Boston. Here, in this rugged land, she had found not only a husband but a home for her heart. By the time they reached the ranch, now, at last, their home together, the sun was sinking low, spilling golden amber across the open fields. They rode side by side, easy in the quiet they shared, the silence speaking more than words could manage. At the corral, Charles dismounted first, then turned to help Olivia down. His hand lingered at her waist longer than courtesy demanded, his gaze meeting hers with an unspoken question. "Welcome home, Mrs. Montgomery," he murmured. The sound of her new name sent a rush of warmth through Olivia's chest. "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery." Before she could step toward the house, Charles startled her by sweeping her into his arms. "It's tradition," he explained with a half-smile, carrying her over the threshold. "For luck." Inside, he set her gently down, but his hand remained at her waist, grounding her. The house already felt changed, no longer just his, but theirs. "Olivia," he began, voice low, almost hesitant. "I want you to know I don't. I mean, I don't expect." She silenced him with the lightest touch of her finger to his lips. "I know," she whispered. "But I am your wife now, in name and in law. I'd like to be your wife in truth as well, if you want that." His eyes darkened, searching hers. "Are you certain? We've only known each other a few days." "Some marry without ever having met," she reminded softly. "At least we've had the chance to talk, to begin to understand one another." He cupped her cheek in his calloused hand. "I want this to be right for you." "It already is," she said simply. The kiss that followed was unlike the first, still tender, but threaded with a passion that set Olivia's heart racing. When at last they parted, both were breathless. "I should see to the stock," Charles said reluctantly. "Evening chores." "I'll wait for you," she promised. That night, in the hush of the room they now shared, they came together as husband and wife. Charles was gentle, patient, his hands mapping new territory with reverence. For Olivia, it was a revelation, not the burden or pain so many of her married friends had warned of, but a sweet discovery of connection and pleasure. Resting in Charles's arms afterward, she felt a peace she had thought forever lost in the wake of the scandal that had driven her from Boston. A new beginning. In the days that followed, life took on a new rhythm. Charles showed Olivia the workings of the ranch, feeding hens and gathering eggs, tending the garden, churning butter from Bessie's milk. She proved a quick learner, tackling each task with determination and quiet intelligence. Evenings found them on the porch or by the fire, sharing the small events of the day. Sometimes they read together from Charles's modest collection, poetry, history, or news clippings from back east. Other nights they simply talked, trading stories of the lives they had led before fate had brought them to this place. And in the dark, behind closed doors, they learned each other more deeply still, their bond of flesh and spirit growing richer with each night's discovery. 2 weeks into their marriage, a letter arrived from Boston. Olivia read it on the porch, tears shining in her eyes. Charles found her there. "Bad news?" he asked gently, taking a seat beside her. "My sister is engaged," Olivia said, dabbing her cheeks. To the son of a prominent family. The wedding will be in the spring. You're sad you won't be there. Yes, she admitted, folding the letter with care, but that's not why I cried. She writes that my scandal is already forgotten. Boston's tongues have found new fodder, a banker who absconded with his client's money. Isn't that good news? Charles asked. I suppose, Olivia said, gazing across the prairie. But it makes everything feel meaningless. My reputation, my career, my whole life was destroyed by gossip that society has already set aside in favor of fresher whispers. Charles took her hand in his. Not meaningless, he said simply. It brought you here. That truth shifted something deep inside her. Had she not been cast out, she never would have answered Charles's advertisement, never would have found herself in this unexpected, abundant life. You're right, she breathed. And I'm grateful. As summer yielded to fall, Olivia found her place not only on the ranch but in the town itself. She joined the Ladies' Aid Society, befriending women like Martha Brennan and Beatrice Wilson. She helped plan Willow Creek's Harvest Festival, drawing on her Boston experience organizing school events. Most importantly, when the town council at last approved funding for a schoolhouse, they came to Olivia. Just 3 days a week, Mayor Thompson explained. We've 15 children of school age now, and more to come once the railroad expands. The offer was made at the general store, and Olivia's uncertain eyes turned to Charles. The ranch comes first, he said steadily, but if Olivia wishes to teach, she has my support. From what I've seen, she's a fine teacher. The quiet pride in his voice made her heart swell. I'd be honored to help build Willow Creek School, she told the mayor. That evening, as they prepared supper together, she raised the subject again. Are you truly comfortable with me teaching? It will take time from the ranch. Charles looked up from the potato he was peeling. Olivia, you light up when you talk about teaching. I won't take that joy from you. He set the knife aside. Besides, you've already shown you can manage both home and ranch with skill. It's not quite what you advertised, she teased. He smiled, eyes warm. Neither am I. The truth turned out far better than the advertisement. The autumn harvest kept them both busy from dawn until dusk. Olivia surprised the temporary ranch hands Charles had hired with her willingness to cook for the crew and even ride out to deliver the midday meal. By the season's end, she had won their respect, a feat not easily earned by an Eastern woman. When the first snow dusted the distant mountains, Olivia realized with quiet wonder that nearly 4 months had passed since she had stepped down from the stagecoach in tears. The life she and Charles had built together already felt more solid, more real, than anything she had ever known in Boston. A confession of love. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Charles reading a new novel while Olivia mended one of his shirts, she suddenly felt a swell of contentment. Setting her sewing aside, she let her gaze linger on her husband's face, the strong line of his jaw, the faint crease between his brows as he concentrated, the way the firelight caught in his hair. Charles, she said softly. He looked up from his book. Yes? I love you. The words slipped from her lips as naturally as breath, surprising her as much as they did him. They had never spoken of love before, their marriage had begun as an arrangement, their affection growing quietly alongside their partnership. Charles slowly laid the book aside. Olivia, he said, his voice husky with emotion, are you certain? Completely certain. She moved to kneel beside his chair. I didn't expect this. I thought perhaps we would grow into fondness, respect, even friendship. But this, she placed her hand over her heart. This is love. I'm sure of it. Charles drew her into his arms, holding her tightly, his embrace both strong and safe. I've been afraid to name it, he confessed into her hair, afraid that speaking it aloud would break the spell. He lifted her face to meet his. I love you, Olivia Montgomery. I have for weeks now, perhaps since the day you had the courage to tell me the truth. Their kiss sealed the words, deeper and more fervent than any they had shared before. When at last they parted, Olivia rested her head against his shoulder. I never thought I would find this, she whispered. Not after everything. Nor I, Charles admitted. After Elizabeth, after the war, I thought that part of me had died. They held each other in silence, the fire crackling softly, snow beginning to fall beyond the window. Two souls who had once expected only practicality had found something far rarer, love born of honesty, respect, and the daily choice to build a life together. A new rhythm. In the weeks after the wedding, Olivia and Charles settled into a rhythm of shared labor and discovery. Charles taught her the rhythms of ranch life, feeding the hens, gathering eggs, tending the garden, churning butter from Bessie's milk. Olivia proved a quick study, tackling every task with determination and intelligence. Evenings became their sanctuary. Sometimes they sat on the porch or by the fire, recounting the day's events, sometimes reading together from Charles's modest library of history, poetry, and novels. Other nights they simply talked, learning the hidden corners of each other's past. In the quiet of their bedroom, their physical closeness deepened too, bringing Olivia unexpected joy and Charles equal astonishment at the depth of their bond. A few weeks later, a letter from Boston brought news of her sister's engagement. Though bittersweet, Charles reminded her that the very scandal which had ruined her reputation back east was what had led her here, to him, and to this new life. Slowly, Olivia came to see the truth in his words. She was no longer just a wife on a ranch, she was part of a community. She joined the Ladies' Aid Society, befriended women like Martha Brennan and Beatrice Wilson, and even helped organize Willow Creek's Harvest Festival. When the town council approved funding for a schoolhouse, Mayor Thompson asked Olivia to teach 3 days a week. Charles supported her fully, insisting that while the ranch remained their priority, her joy in teaching mattered just as much. His faith in her filled Olivia with quiet pride. By autumn, she had earned the respect of ranch hands and townsfolk alike. And on a snowy evening nearly 4 months after her tearful arrival in Willow Creek, Olivia declared her love for Charles, and heard his own long-guarded confession in return. Winter and promise. Winter shortened the days and lengthened the nights by the hearth. Olivia transformed the house into a true home with curtains, woven rugs, and thoughtful touches of warmth. At Christmas, Charles spoke of children, something both of them longed for. He wanted a family to share the land with, to pass it down through generations. Olivia, too, dreamed of holding a child of her own. Charles promised that when the time came, their children would be raised not just with work, but with love. By January, Willow Creek School opened its doors with Olivia teaching 15 children 3 days a week. Charles often rode in to escort her home on stormy days, protective as ever. A February blizzard isolated the ranch for nearly a week, but only deepened their closeness as they shared untold stories, Charles of the war, Olivia of her complicated family. She realized then how much richer, how much more real her life was than it had ever been in Boston. In April, Olivia confirmed she was expecting. The news left Charles first speechless, then elated. He lifted her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with unrestrained joy. I never knew I could be this happy, he admitted. The town celebrated with them, showering them with blessings and practical gifts. Charles grew even more protective, reducing Olivia's teaching to 2 days a week and hiring extra help on the ranch. Summer passed in a blur of preparations until, on a crisp October morning, their son James, named for Charles's father, was born. Charles proved a tender, devoted father, unafraid of night feedings or diapers. By their first anniversary in November, life had settled into a new rhythm. The ranch had enjoyed its most prosperous year yet. Olivia had returned to teaching 1 day a week, often with baby James in her arms. Over a special supper, she confessed she could not imagine any life but this. Charles raised a toast to the woman who came to me in tears and found the courage to stay. Later, by the fire, he asked if things might have been different had she not wept that first day. Olivia smiled softly. Perhaps I would have kept pretending at happiness. But I'm glad I didn't, for it brought me here. Charles took her hand, his voice steady. Then no more pretending. Only truth, between us, always. What had begun as a practical arrangement had become something far greater, a love story written with honesty, strengthened by devotion, and full of promise for the years ahead.